All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited you're joining us here for this live webcast for Conquering Cancer, The Missing Link. I'm truly honored and excited to have these three very distinguished medical professionals here with us this evening to answer many of the questions that have come in that you have submitted to us, many of the questions that you've been sending us throughout the series, and a lot of very similar questions that have come in. So it sounds like we'll have a chance this evening during this live webcast to answer many questions around diet and nutrition and lifestyle, what the science says, what the evidence-based approach is for helping our bodies become what I like to call a cancer-fighting fortress. So whether your interest is prevention or you yourself are trying to maximize your body's own healing potential, we're going to get into a lot of that information on this webcast over the next hour. So if you're joining us live, you can submit your questions below this video, and I will try to bring some of those live questions in as well. If you're joining us and watching this on the recording, I want to welcome all of you live and on the recording, and thank you for participating and taking this information very seriously, because this information is not only life-changing, but it can be potentially life-saving. So thank you, and yeah, let's dive in. I'll introduce myself briefly, I'll introduce our guests, and then we'll get right into it. So I'm Nathan Crane, certified holistic cancer coach, best-selling author of Becoming Cancer-Free, as well as your host and producer of Conquering Cancer, The Missing Link. Again, very excited that you're joining us for this. During this webcast, I'm joined by three world-class physicians, Dr. Jenn Simmons, Dr. Michael Klaper, and Dr. Dean Ornish. I'm truly honored and delighted they've taken time from their busy schedules to be here with all of you to help you overcome some of the misinformation about what I like to call the anti-cancer diet and lifestyle, empower you to take control of your health, and inspire you to find the best path forward for your own personal health journey. As always, even though we're answering many of your questions during this live Q&A, this is not medical advice, it's informational only. Please consult with your physician before taking any action on any serious health changes. Be smart about it. And like I said, consult with your own practitioner. And before we get into the webcast, let me take a moment to thank everyone who has upgraded to own this documentary series, because by owning it, you not only have lifetime access to all of the information in the entire documentary series about cancer prevention and healing, whether you have it on digital or DVD for yourself, for your family, but you're also supporting our mission at Conquering Cancer to continue bringing this important information to humanity. And with every purchase, we donate to wonderful nonprofits like colmed.org and the Beljanski Foundation and others who are doing real work in natural and integrative solutions for cancer. So thank you for everyone who has purchased and who will continue to purchase over the next few days while we still have a limited discount of units available. There should be, if you're on the webpage right now, there should be a button there somewhere if you want to learn more about that. So without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce our speakers for tonight's webcast. So first up, we have Dr. Dean Ornish, known as the father of lifestyle medicine, and really the first to prove that lifestyle medicine can reverse the progression of many chronic diseases, including coronary heart disease, early stage prostate cancer, and cellular aging. He's also the founder and president of the nonprofit Preventive Medicine Research Institute, clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, and University of California, San Diego, and the author of 7 books, all national bestsellers, including his latest book, Undo It. If you don't have a copy, go grab a copy. It's a great book. Dr. Ornish, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Next up, we have Dr. Michael Klaper, who's a graduate of the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago. He's practiced acute care medicine in Hawaii, Canada, California, Florida, and New Zealand for the past 40 years. He's been focusing upon health-promoting food and lifestyle choices to help reverse disease and prevent the need for hospitalization and surgery. Dr. Klaper has served as nutrition advisor to NASA's programs for space colonists on the moon and Mars, along with an active telemedicine practice. Dr. Klaper, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Jenn Simmons, who spent the first 17 years of her career as one of the country's top breast cancer surgeons. Her own experience as a patient with autoimmune disease led her to functional medicine. so enamored with the prospect of preventing and reversing disease rather than masking symptoms, she left her prestigious position as a breast cancer surgeon to start Real Health MD, a functional medicine oasis for those affected by breast cancer. Her work motivates women to put their breast cancer diagnosis behind them. Dr. Simmons, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome with this esteemed panel, but I'm gonna try to hold up my end.
Well, I've come to know you really well this past year, and through the interviews, I think you have a lot of wisdom and intelligence and experience to share. So, wouldn't have invited you here had I thought otherwise. Saying yes. So let's get right into it. We've had tons of questions come in around prevention, and I'll list off a few, and then we'll take a few minutes from each of our experts here to talk about prevention, cancer prevention. David, for example, is asking best foods for cancer prevention. All kinds of questions around diet and nutrition for prevention. Marcy's asking about what about the vegan diet for prevention? What about, is it possible to prevent cancer even if you have the BRCA1 gene? How do you prevent cancer, et cetera, et cetera? We've had tons and tons of questions come in around prevention. So I think it's a great place to start. If you're thinking about prevention, I think you're thinking on the right path. And why don't we start with you, Dr. Ornish, with maybe some foundations, somebody who came here saying, hey, I'm curious of prevention. Of course, this could be a whole masterclass all by itself, but what are some kind of core foundations that people could start thinking about if they want to try and prevent cancer?
Sure. Well, fortunately, the same things that can help prevent cancer can help prevent so many of the most common and costly chronic diseases. We found over 45 years of doing research that simple lifestyle changes, what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, how much love and support, can prevent and often even reverse the progression of many chronic diseases. These include a whole foods, plant-based diet, essentially a vegan or near vegan diet that's low in fat, low in sugar and refined carbs, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, things of that sort, moderate exercise, both aerobic and strength training, meditation and other yoga-based stress management techniques, like stretching, breathing, meditation, etc., and spending more time with your friends and family and loved ones, sort of reduce it to its essence to eat well, move more, stress less, and love more. And we found that these same lifestyle changes could affect so many different chronic diseases. I was trained, like all three of us, to view these as being fundamentally, high blood pressure and cholesterol and heart disease and diabetes and prostate cancer and breast cancer and colon cancer and Alzheimer's as being fundamentally different diseases, different diagnoses, and different treatments. And yet over the last 4 decades, we found these same lifestyle changes could stop and often reverse the progression of so many of these conditions. And I realized that although we tend to think of them as being fundamentally different, they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms. And so the radical unifying theory that my wife Ann and I put forth in our Undo It book is that the reason why these same lifestyle changes can affect so many different diseases is that they have a lot more in common than they have different. They're not so different. In other words, they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms, things like chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, changes in the microbiome, and telomeres, and gene expression, and angiogenesis, and overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, and changes in immune function. And each of these mechanisms, in turn, is directly influenced by the lifestyle choices that we make each day. So it radically simplifies things. We don't have to say this is your diabetes diet and this is your heart disease diet and so on. And we found for the first time in a series of randomized trials that when we started doing this work, it was thought that once you had heart disease, for example, the best you could hope to do was to slow down the rate at which you got worse. We found, ounce of prevention, pound of cure, that it takes a lot to reverse most chronic diseases. But if you're willing to make big enough changes, and not just one thing, but in many things, that your body often has a remarkable capacity to begin healing, and much more quickly than we had once realized. And so we found that these lifestyle changes could reverse even severe heart disease. We published that in the Lancet and the Journal of the American Medical Association, most of the major cardiology journals. We then found these same lifestyle changes could lower high cholesterol levels, blood pressure, type 2 diabetes in terms of your blood sugar. We did a study with Craig Venter where we found that when you change your lifestyle, it changes your genes, over 500 genes in just 3 months. And in fact, turning on the good genes that keep us healthy, turning off the ones that cause these mechanisms that in turn lead to these chronic diseases. We published a paper with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, a couple of papers, that when you change your lifestyle, it actually lengthens telomeres, the ends of our DNA that control how long we live. She had done earlier studies that when people who smoke or who are under chronic stress or eat junk food, their telomeres get shorter faster. And as your telomeres get shorter, your life gets shorter, and the risk of premature death from all of these different chronic diseases goes up proportionate to that. And most things in biology go both ways. So if bad things make them shorter, I thought, well, maybe good things make them longer. And we found for the first time 14 years ago, which we published in the Lancet Oncology, that these lifestyle changes can lengthen telomeres. And the Lancet editors called it reversing aging at a cellular level. And we're now in the midst of doing the first randomized trial to see if these same lifestyle changes may stop or even reverse the progression of early stage Alzheimer's disease, which shares many of these same mechanisms. Medicare 11 years ago created a new benefit category to cover my reversing heart disease program. So we've been training hospitals and clinics and physician groups, and it's working. 94% of the people finish all of these 72 hours of training. It's twice a week, 4 hours at a time for 9 weeks, an hour of exercise, stress management, support group, and group meal with a lecture. And in October, they broadened the coverage to include people who are interested in doing this by Zoom. So now you can do this out of your home. You don't have to drive anywhere. You can live anywhere in the country. This will help reduce health disparities and health inequities. If anyone's interested in doing this, just go to ornish.com, ornish.com. It's all the Medicare and Aetna and other insurance companies are now paying it for it virtually. So we also give you several weeks of food during the 9 weeks of the program. And most people feel so much better so quickly. The irony is when you make big changes, it's sometimes easier than just making small changes, even though that's counterintuitive. Only a third of people who are put on cholesterol-lowering drugs are able to take them for just more than 4 to 6 months, and yet 94% of the people who go through our program are able to stop or reverse it. And since this is a show on cancer, and I'll stop after this, is that we did a randomized trial with the chairs of urology at the time at both UCSF, where I'm a professor, and at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Dr. Peter Carroll at UCSF and Dr. Bill Fair at Sloan Kettering, that these same lifestyle changes may stop and even stop and often even reverse the progression of men with early stage prostate cancer. And what's true for prostate cancer may be true for early stage breast cancer as well. So the more diseases we look at, the more evidence we have to show what a powerful difference these changes in lifestyle can make. And I think our unique contribution has been to use these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be as a way of redefining what's possible for people.
So and thank you for that wonderful explanation. I think one of the major issues that we deal with is that the focus of our healthcare system should be health, but it's not. And our healthcare system is really focused on illness. And we don't really have a prevention system. And the main reason that we don't have a prevention system in this country is because there's no way to monetize that. And our healthcare system is entirely built upon monetization. And so we have focused our efforts on early detection, and that has really muddied the waters and made it confusing for people. So I often hear, I don't understand how I got breast cancer. I get a mammogram every year. And people confuse that and think that somehow if they're going for these screening exams, that it's somehow protective. And so we've really confused early detection and prevention in this country. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that there is a complete absence of how to drive health in terms of the education of our healthcare providers. And so quite frankly, most physicians are not like you, Dr. Ornish. Most physicians have no idea how to advise people to be healthy. And I know that you've worked very, very hard in your career to train healthcare professionals to teach people how to be healthy, but it is just not universally adopted yet. And so we're fighting a pretty big machine, because the way that the machine is designed now is wait until people get sick, get into the system, and just manage their symptoms, because it doesn't pay doctors, and it doesn't pay hospitals. It certainly doesn't pay pharmaceutical companies for people to be healthy. So there's so little motivation there. And and it starts at the time of medical school. Because when we're training our physicians, when we're training our healthcare providers, we are not teaching them that that's important, right? Because if that were in fact important, if nutrition and lifestyle and mindset and all of those things are important, why aren't we teaching it to our youth?
And let
And
me
so
just build on what you just said, which is so important, because I'm on the nutrition working group of the American College of Cardiology. We published a paper last year in the leading cardiology journal that the average doctor gets 4 hours per year of training in nutrition. And even that's mostly, vitamin C and scurvy and that kind of thing.
And that's in
the
the
average,
first, and that's during medical school, and then never again afterwards.
Well, that's true. And the average cardiology fellow gets 0 training in 4 years of fellowship. That's why I spent so many years working with insurance companies with Medicare to cover this, because I knew if we change reimbursement, we change medical practice and even medical education. Now, drugs and surgery can be life-saving. We've all benefited from them. But if that's all you're trained to do, if you're trained to use drugs and surgery, if you're reimbursed to use drugs and surgery, and that's all you're trained or reimbursed to do, then that's what we do. Like, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you see everything is a nail. And that's, to me, part of why I spend so much of my time doing research, is that we can redefine what's possible and show how powerful these changes are. Because people are like, oh, diet and lifestyle, that's kind of boring. How powerful could that be? Give me a new drug, a new device, a new surgical procedure. As a surgeon, I'm sure you hear that all the time. But, part of our unique contribution has been to show how powerful these simple changes are and how quickly we can measure improvements in people.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I get it.
Yeah,
right?
I want to go to thank you, Dr. Simmons. I want to go to Dr. Klaper here for 2 things. One, because of his Moving Medicine Forward initiative, which is basically addressing this. I love how there are medical students that are literally asking to be taught this, and they're not getting it at their schools, and so they are bringing in, this education on their own, which is incredible. So maybe Dr. Klaper, you may want to talk briefly about that. But in addition, I want to give Dr. Klaper a moment here to come back to the original question, which is prevention. People are wondering, what can I do to prevent cancer? They're afraid, they're scared. It runs in my genes, it runs in my family. I've been told, I'm most likely to get cancer, or I see cancer all around me, and we know the statistics are going up and there's more and more cancer everywhere. People are afraid and they're wondering, what can I do? You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Those are 2 important questions. I appreciate your interest in our Moving Medicine Forward initiative, where I go to medical schools. It used to be in person, now I do it by Zoom. And I give medical students the lecture I wish someone had given me 50 years ago, called What I Wish I Learned in Medical School About Nutrition, and explain how food plays a major role in the diseases they're going to spend the majority of their time treating. And give them resources to keep the flame of nutrition interest burning, studies that they can bring to their professors, questions to ask their professors in outpatient clinic about, do you think this patient's diet had anything to do with their obesity and diabetes, and to get the conversation going. So not only does nutrition become a real issue, but the concept of disease reversal through plant-based nutrition becomes a thing where, of course, like we know about the microbiome now. Well, reversing disease through plant-based nutrition is the goal that we're trying to solidify in the heads of both medical students and medical teaching faculty. And anyone interested can go to my website, drklaper.com, and click on Moving Medicine Forward, and you'll see what we're doing and how to support us. That said, I really want to reach out to those folks with those real concerns in their real life situations about how they can prevent cancer. And so I'm going to take a step back, put on our biologist view of the human organism, and turn the clock back 1 million years ago to the African savanna, where our ancient foraging ancestors supposedly evolved. And back then, when the waters were pure and the earth was unpolluted, and not so carcinogenic as it is now. Cancers were relatively rare when they look at gorillas in the wild eating leaves and fruit all day, very rarely develop cancers. Antelope grazing on the plain, very rarely develop cancers. Now, occasionally, they would run into low-level carcinogens, I'm sure, on a mushroom that they ate or some contaminant in the water, and a low-level carcinogen would go through their system. And as these molecules went into their cells and praying some of the DNA strands there, some of the cells may have just begun to divide in a precancerous manner. But the body has tremendous ability in every cell. We have repair enzymes. We have genes that promote membrane stabilization. The Braca gene turns off oncogenes, which are cancer-promoting genes. The Braca gene is a good gene. It's the mutation when the Braca doesn't do what it's supposed to do that we have problems there. And our ancient hominid ancestors eating, most of contrary to the paleo myth, most of the calories that were brought into the Paleolithic camp were gathered by the women who spent all day digging up roots and tubers and gathering berries and edible grasses. That's what our small mouths and grinding molar teeth are about. We are plant-eating hominids, basically.
And as long as couldn't run away.
And the plants could run away. And as long as that plant-based food stream is coming through on a steady basis, the cells have the nutrients they need to do this tissue repair, to shut down cancer growth. And as a result, because there was so little cancer-promoting forces out there and a diet that promoted tissue stabilization and anti-cancer properties in the tissues, cancer wasn't a big problem. Now, fast forward to the 21st century. The world is far more carcinogenic. There's carcinogens in the water, in the food, in the air, cosmic rays. There's no end of carcinogenic stimuli. And that really places more importance on our own body's defenses. They're still there like they were 1 million years ago, but are we going to help them by giving them a diet rich in all these colorful fruits and vegetables and whole grains, etc.? Or are we going to inhibit our own anti-cancer defenses? How do you inhibit it? Well, to that healthy food stream, add a bunch of refined sugar, a bunch of meat. What's the problem with meat? When you eat meat, you flood your liver with the amino acid building blocks, and the liver says, building blocks, let's build something. And it responds by putting out a surge of this hormone, insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, one of the most powerful growth-promoting hormones in the body. Fine if you're a 10-year-old growing girl, but if you're a woman with an early breast cancer or a guy with early prostate cancer, the last thing you want is a diet full of meat that promotes you walking around with high levels of IGF-1. But that's exactly what the standard Western diet is doing these days. Other things suppress our own cancer suppression facilities, drinking ethyl alcohol, vegetable oils, processed foods of all types, lack of sleep. When we're under stress, our adrenal glands put out a hormone called cortisol, and that suppresses our immune system. And people are walking around sleep deprived, eating sugar, drinking alcohol, the high cortisol levels. Our own cancer prevention, cancer shutdown mechanisms are suppressed there. So the answer to how can I prevent cancer? Well, get out of your own way. Do everything you can do to promote your cancer protection mechanism. Stop the sugars and the oils and the meats and the refined foods, and keep that steady stream of whole plant foods, the whole grains and potatoes and fruits and vegetables and legumes going through. And certain foods have particular abilities to stimulate our anti-cancer properties. It's been shown that mushrooms of various types are very beneficial to stimulate our own anti-cancer properties. Nutritional yeast has beta-glycans that stimulate our cancer defenses. Berries of all types, dark green leafy vegetables. These should be a rock solid, steady component of your diet. Every day, eat something dark and green.
Crucifers. Don't forget the crucifers.
And the crucifers, absolutely. What she just said is so true. There's something about the cruciferous vegetable family family, the kale and broccoli and cauliflower and their ilk have a significant amount of anti-cancer properties. So clean up your diet. Make sure it's not a matter of this component and that component. Like Dr. Colin Campbell said in his book, Whole, W-H-O-L-E, it's the whole food stream going through your system, meal after meal, day after day. And if it's one that promotes stability in your tissues and does not promote the molecular chaos that modern life and modern diet can produce, you've really reduced your chances. Even if you've got cancer genes in your family, as the old saying in lifestyle medicine goes, your genes may load the gun, but your diet and your lifestyle pull the trigger. You may have a genetic propensity towards a disease, but whether it manifests largely, not completely, but largely depends, again, on how you are treating your body, what you're eating, and how you're living your life. So health comes from healthy living. And so eat healthy and be good to yourself. There's no cheating on sleep. It catches up with you. So those are a foundation of where to start to prevent cancer.
Let me just add one.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You can go first.
I just wanted to address the Braca thing because I think the perception is that this affects a significant population of the breast cancer population. And in fact, it only represents somewhere between 5 to 10% of the breast cancer population. And even when we look at those BRCA mutation carriers, 100% of them do not develop breast cancer. So there's something else in play there. And it's exactly what Dr. Klaper said. It is the environment's effect on your genes that determine your outcome. So your genes are not writing the story. They're a rough guideline that is then customized and tailor-made for you according to the environment that you put your genes in.
Yeah, and what I was going to add to that is that since you're asking, Nathan, about prevention, that if you're trying to reverse chronic disease, that's what this Undo It book is about. It's about reversing or undoing disease. But if you're just trying to stay healthy, lose a few pounds, whatever, what matters most is your overall way of eating and living. It's not all or nothing. We found in all of our studies, I predicted incorrectly, as it turned out, that the younger people with less severe disease would do better, but I was wrong. It wasn't how old or how sick they were. All that really mattered in all of our studies, whether we're using heart disease, your diabetes, your blood sugar, your prostate, your PSA level, your length of your telomeres, whatever, the more you change, the more you improve at any age and the better you feel. And so it's not all or nothing. If you're trying to reverse disease, that's pretty all or nothing. That's why, that's the pound of cure. It takes a lot to reverse chronic diseases. That's why we were able to show that for the first time, because most people didn't go far enough. But if you're just trying to stay healthy, lose a few pounds, get your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your blood pressure down a bit, if you indulge yourself one day, eat healthier the next. You don't have time to exercise one day, do a little more the next. You don't have time to meditate for an hour, do it for a minute. Whatever you do, there's a corresponding benefit. It's not all or nothing. Even the language of behavioral change often has this kind of fascist, Nurse Ratched wagging the finger like, I cheated on my diet. And once you call foods good or bad, it's a small step to saying I'm a bad person because I ate bad food. And at that point, might as well just, eat the whole pint of ice cream because you're a bad person, right? So just by saying, look, be compassionate with yourself. Whatever you do, there's a corresponding benefit. And the other thing is that, I had to give a talk. My son is an accomplished musician, and he's 21. One of his favorite indie bands is a band called Wolfpack. And the front man is vegan, and they played at the Greek Theater in Berkeley. They had like 20,000 people there on the lawn. And they heard I was there. So I went backstage and said hi to him. He said, during my concerts, I like to go out and talk about why eating a plant-based diet is a good thing. I want you to, and I usually talk about your work. So since you're here, why don't you go and do that? I said, you want me to go out in the middle of your concert and talk about why people should eat a plant-based diet to a group of like 19 and 22-year-olds? He goes, yeah. So I did. And so for like 15 minutes, I was cool to my 21-year-old son. That's about how long it lasted. But I didn't talk about heart disease and diabetes and cancer. I said, look, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed by like, what can I do as one person about some of the big issues that are threatening our planet, like global warming or the deforestation of the Amazon or feeding the hungry or, the billions of sentient animals that get killed every year. What can I do as one person? Well, something as primal as what I put in my mouth every day can affect all those things. Most people don't know that more global warming is caused by livestock consumption than all forms of transportation combined. If it takes 14 times more resources to make a pound of meat-based protein than plant-based protein, something as simple as, and you don't have to be vegan, just have a meatless Monday, whatever you do, just one step. Imbue those choices with meaning. And if they're meaningful, they're measurable. Most of the deforestation of the Amazon is to clear cut land for cattle grazing, all these factory farms where these animals, spend their whole life in a little pen and then they get killed in these horrible ways. If that's all you have to eat, it's one thing, but we can have so many healthier ways to eat. So if we can imbue if it's meaningful, it's sustainable. If it's pleasurable, it's sustainable. And the last thing I want to say is that when you change your lifestyle, it's not about preventing something bad from happening years down the road. We talk about cancer prevention, heart disease prevention. Those are noble goals, but most people don't really think anything bad is going to happen to them. I mean, we all know we're going to die. It's still 100% mortality, but we don't think about it most of the time. I mean, for someone who's had a scare, they've been diagnosed with breast cancer, they had a heart attack, they'll do pretty much anything their doctor says for a month or two, and then they stop. Because fear is not really a sustainable motivator. But what are our joy and pleasure and love and feeling good? And when you change your lifestyle, these biological mechanisms are so dynamic. Most people feel so much better so quickly in ways that really matter. They think more clearly, they have more energy, they can do more, their sexual function improves, they look 10 or 20 years younger, they look better, they smell better, they taste better. All these things really are important. There's a wonderful documentary called The Game Changers that talked about how athletic performance improves so dramatically. So I think it's important that we can focus on, the meaning that comes from making these changes and how much better you feel. And yeah, maybe you live longer, but the second leading cause of death in adolescence is suicide now. And so, telling somebody who's depressed that they're going to live longer doesn't really do it. We need to really, but we found in our studies that depression scores improve by 50% when you change your diet. One study just came out a few days ago that plant-based diets are high in an amino acid called proline, which is linked with depression. So, for all these different reasons, not just focusing on fear of dying, but joy of living is really what makes it sustainable.
Yeah, I love that. If it's sustainable, if it's pleasurable, if it's meaningful, then
it's sustainable.
If it's meaningful, yes, then it's sustainable. Really well said. So thank you for kind of that first half, this opening of this. Now in the second half of this webcast, what I'd love to do is I'm going to select questions that have been both submitted online previously, and we have many more that are coming in right now on the chat. And I'm going to just kind of select around, and maybe some of these I think can be answered quickly. And I'd like to give each of you a chance to, answer one at a time and maybe spend a couple of minutes on each one. And then we can get through a lot of these questions, because a lot of them are common questions that I hear again and again when I am talking to cancer patients. I just was doing a lecture yesterday with a diabetes expert, and we had someone ask this exact same question. And so it comes up again and again. And so, Dr. Klaper, I'll ask you to answer this question. Maybe if you could give it, in a short, concise answer would be amazing. And we can try and answer as many of these as we can in the short time that we have left. Ileana is asking, this is a common misconception. Since sugar feeds cancer, is it wise to eliminate or reduce fruit and grains? Oh, you're muted there.
You're on mute. You're on mute. Apparently, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the most common.
I thought that
you're on mute.
There's a common belief that sugar feed cancer. That's a bit controversial, but there's no question that a diet high in refined sugars, lots of candies and cakes and cola drinks are probably not doing good things for someone with cancer for a whole number of mechanisms, more than just, quote, feeding cancer. It suppresses their immune system, etc. But the bigger context, well, then I should stop eating fruit and stop eating grains because they have starches that turn into sugar. I would say, no, don't take it that far. Because one, whole fruit, we're talking about whole fruits, not fruit juices here. Whole fruits, one, they're mostly fiber and water, which does good things for you. And second, they come in with a host of these vitamins and minerals that stimulate your own anti-cancer defenses. And the amount of sugar in an apple is really quite tiny, the truth of it is. And the same thing in a peach or a banana. And I mean, how many apples can you eat? 8? Even so, there's going to be very little sugar going in there. So no, I think the fruits do far more good than harm. And same with the whole grains, the fiber, the pectins, the things that they bring in, I think are very beneficial for the body in many ways. They feed the microbiome, they enhance host defenses. So no, as long as they're whole grains, not white flour products, but they're whole grains and whole fruits, no, I don't think there's any reason to limit them, even if you have a cancer in your body.
Let me just build on that, Nathan, real quick. When you go from whole wheat flour to white flour, or from brown rice to white rice, you're removing the fiber and the bran. And the fiber and the bran, they fill you up before you get too many calories. As Michael said, you can only eat so many apples, you're going to get full before you get too many calories. But they also slow the rate of absorption from your gut into your blood. And so your blood sugar kind of goes up slowly and it goes down slowly. But when you remove the fiber and the bran, when you eat white rice or white flour or sugar or high fructose corn syrup, it goes right into your blood. So your blood spikes and it gets to these high levels that cause your pancreas to make insulin. And the insulin brings down your blood sugar, which is good, but it also promotes inflammation, and it increases the secretion of IGF-1 and other things like that. And so the reason why people get confused is they combine all carbs. There are good carbs and there are bad carbs. Good carbs are as they come in nature: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, soy products, as they come in nature. Bad carbs are the ones that have been refined. And this is one of many reasons why that's true.
Beautiful.
I think we also need to bear in mind, when we're talking about whole grains, we're talking about whole grains in their whole form, because there are a lot of things that are made from the processed form of whole grains, and those do drive insulin and do drive insulin-like growth factor and do drive cancer. So there is also an enormous part of our population that just does not tolerate grains, even when they're in their whole form, that they do spike their blood sugar and insulin. And so I think for everyone, this is an individual story, and not everyone is going to respond to foods the same way, but that making sure that whatever you're eating is in its original form is the key. Variety is the key. That is what drives a healthy microbiome. You want a vast array of foods. Our ancestors ate 140 plants over the course of a week. Most people in this day and age eat like 5. So the diversity, and if you are going to eat grains, you should make sure that they're whole grains, because once you process them, they are very readily absorbed as sugar. And our bodies really don't know the difference between flour and table sugar.
Yeah, I like the conversation around, look, make sure that majority of your food is it's real foods, it's whole foods, it's not processed foods. I was making a shopping list yesterday. We're going to visit my mom in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she's like, hey, you guys do all the cooking, I'll shop, just tell me what I need to get. I was like, okay. And so, because we do a lot of meal prepping and all of that, and I was making a long list, and it's like 90% plus of what I'm sending her, it's all fresh foods. It's mostly produce aisle. It's all, I didn't used to eat that way. I grew up on, meat and dairy and, Midwestern diet and fast food and so forth, and had a lot of problems from all of that. And I look at what I eat now, and it's primarily fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts and seeds and berries and, mushrooms and all these kinds of things that if you go into that aisle and you're shopping in that primarily produce aisle, you're going to be selecting more of the healthy foods. And if you go down the packaged aisles, you're getting things that are processed that are not necessarily going to be as health promoting. So I think it's just a great foundation for people, whether it's prevention or healing. Right. And so we get into the process question now. Even things that are promoted as healthy, like olive oil, Denise is asking, do you recommend the consumption of extra virgin cold pressed olive oil? I consume a whole foods plant-based diet, but I would assume oil in any form should be eliminated. Messages are confusing. Anyone who wants to jump in and answer this, please go ahead.
Well, it depends on what your goals are. Oil, like all oils, are 100% fat. And fat has 9 calories per gram, and protein and carbs have only 4. So one of the easiest ways to lose weight, if that's what you want to do, I wrote a book years ago called Eat More, Weigh Less, which was based on the finding the average person in our studies lost 24 pounds in the first year, even though they were eating more food and more frequently, because the food was less dense in calories. If you go from a high fat to a lower fat diet, even if you eat the same volume of food, you get full before you get too many calories because the food is so much less dense. But there was a study that came out in the Lancet last month that claimed, it was funded by the olive oil growers, claiming that the headline was, Mediterranean diet better than low-fat diet at preventing heart disease. But if you start reading the study, you find the low-fat diet was, 32% fat instead of 36% fat. That the dietary fat was just one of many factors. The Mediterranean diet people, they were giving them fruits and vegetables and legumes and nuts in the way they came in nature. They gave the so-called low-fat diet foods that were high in sugar and frozen meals and dried fruits and sweets and bakery goods and things like that. And even then, there was no statistically significant difference in women in any of the measures, and in men, only when they combined them all, they found a little bit of a difference. But again, they attributed it all to the olive oil, when in fact the olive oil was probably the least of what was going on there. So if you're going to be eating oils and you don't have heart disease, a little olive oil is fine. If you're trying to prevent or reverse, especially if you're trying to reverse it, it's better to avoid it.
Yeah, if I can put a point on the oil issue here. We need fats in our diet. Yay, fats. Your skin oils are made of fat, your hormones made of fat, your brain's wrapped in fat. You need some fat every day. What we're saying is get it out of avocados and walnuts and flax seeds and whole plant foods. Why? Because when you eat an olive, when you eat a piece of coconut or a walnut, the micro droplets of walnut oil and flax oil and olive oil are bound to the fiber of the olive, of the coconut. And it takes, once you chew it up, it takes hours for your digestive enzymes to get into that piece of coconut or that piece of olive, and for the amylases to break down the starches so the lipases can get in and emulsify the fats and promote absorption. And as a result, the actual amount of fat that gets into the blood is very small. It rises very slowly. One pass through the liver, pretty much taken out of the bloodstream. Doesn't have a big pharmaceutical effect. But if you crush the olives and now you've got their liquid fat in a bottle, and you say, ooh, Mediterranean diet, you pour on a couple of tablespoons or half a cup of oil onto your pasta there and shovel that in, nothing slows down that absorption. That fat leaps into your bloodstream. Now you got a couple of tablespoons of liquid oil in your bloodstream, and it has pharmaceutical effects. It gets into the walls of the arteries and prevents the production of nitric oxide that allows the blood vessels to dilate and stay nice and elastic. It inhibits blood clotting. And the question germane here, does it get into cells and make membranes unstable? Does it, if you've got an early cancer growing there, does vegetable oil, could it possibly have an adverse effect? I've seen studies both ways, but you can just see how unnatural a food that it is. It's not even a food, it's liquid fat in a bottle. And that's the difference between oils and fats in their whole form. So please get your food, get your fats out of whole foods, not out of liquid oils there. But that's the issue with the oils.
Yeah. And there are a considerable amount of very highly inflammatory oils on the market because we're making oils from things that we were not meant to be making oils from, and they're heat extracted and therefore they're oxidized and become very pro-inflammatory. So if you are going to choose to add some oils to your diet, cold pressed, and just make sure that it's from like one single source, because anytime you have a mixed source, there's always the increased possibility that there are inflammagens included in.
Beautiful. I want to, maybe each of you could take 1 or 2 minutes on this, and then I want to transition to a different topic off of diet, but I think it's an important one. So there's a lot of people here saying, hey, I understand from all the doctors in the documentary series that the whole foods plant-based diet is the most evidence-based diet for cancer prevention, cancer healing, as well as evidence-based for heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease, in many cases, once you deal with the food allergies, neurodegenerative disease, etc. But concerns about getting the correct nutrition on eating, like this person's Linda's asking, how do I ensure I get all the correct nutrition by eating vegan? We always hear that we don't have to worry if we're eating plant-based, but I think we do need more specific info. make sure we're not skimping out on certain vitamins, minerals, etc.
Yeah, let me just take a real quick pass at that. I mean, I think it's kind of so ironic that people are so concerned about getting a nutritionally healthy diet when they switch to a plant-based diet, when the one they're eating already is the one that's probably the least helpful for them. So putting that in context, it used to be thought that you had to combine amino acids and get complete proteins every day. We now know that's really not necessary. If you're getting enough calories and you're getting a pretty diverse groups of fruits and vegetables, it's hard not to get enough protein on a plant-based diet. And for those who are really concerned about it, then you can eat more foods that are really packed with protein, like legumes and nuts and seeds and things of that sort. So while I do appreciate the concern that many people have, it's really not that hard to do.
Yeah, I agree. If you are tracking your protein and you are eating enough food, which if you're following a vegan diet, you certainly should be and can be eating enough, more than adequate levels of protein. And, going back to the game changers, I mean, the top athletes in the country and the top bodybuilders in the world are following vegan diets. So if anything, that should be incentive to adopt a vegan diet, because we see these tremendous examples of these elite athletes who are following a vegan diet and performing better than anyone in the world.
And who raised their game. People who became like Dotsie Bausch became an Olympic medalist. Bicyclist is one of the most demanding sports at the age of almost 40. Or the Tennessee Titans became NFL champions, Super Bowl champions for the first time when they began doing that.
But the
scene in the Game Changers, I had dinner with Joseph Pace at the TED conference last month, and he said that they've done surveys. The scene that caused more people than any to become vegan was they had these 3 athletes, and they put them they give them a single meat-based meal, and then they measure the frequency and hardness of erections they had at night when they slept. And because it's a normal guy function, you have erections when you sleep just to kind of keep the plumbing going. And then they did the same thing the next night with just a single plant-based meal. I think it was a Beyond Meat meal. And they did the same thing. And they found that all 3 guys, and these are guys in their 20s, elite athletes, had 300 to 500% more frequent erections and 10 to 15% harder erections. Apparently the film crew went on a vegan diet after they shot this scene. But again, it just shows you how quickly your body, one meal can make a difference in ways that really matter to people. That it's not just about living longer, it's about living better.
Well, it just really shows you the minds of men.
That's a good point. I mean,
you know what? I think a lot of women are really happy when their guys can have erections too. So let's be clear here.
There you go. I mean, I like the Game Changers because it opened up a lot of people's eyes to the possibilities. I don't like the Game Changers because a lot of it was anecdotal when they could have brought in hard science to really overcome a lot of the skepticism, because there's a lot of questions around, well, yeah, all that's anecdotal, what about the hard science? Because the hard science does back up a lot of that, which is great.
By the way, just to clarify, Rob Osfeldt is running a study that I'm collaborating with, a randomized controlled trial on that scene to see what the effects of meals are on erectile function. So we are now doing those kinds of studies.
Oh, that'll be great. Yeah. And I mean, some of the questions around nutrition that we get a lot of, I see now, and I see again and again, is not only, so we know a plant-based diet, if you're eating a diverse from all the food groups that we talked about, you have all the amino acids, the building blocks for all the different thousands of proteins that your body needs. Some questions that people have is, well, is that bioavailable? So are you actually able to digest that, process it, and use it to convert and to make these proteins? Also, what about omegas? People have a lot of questions about omegas. Are they able to actually convert that ALA from the plant omegas to the DHA and the EPA and so forth? Vitamin D, vitamin K, iron. These are a lot of the common questions around nutrient deficiencies that people ask because of the information that's been out there around it. So I don't know if we have the time to get into every one of those, but maybe you'd want to address.
Let's do just a little quick lightning round. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to get all the essential amino acids in one meal or even one day. Your body will hold on to them and combine them. So that we know is much easier than we once thought. The omega-3s, the fish and fish oil, where do they get it? They get from the algae, from eating the algae. So if you get algae-based omega-3s, your body can make them into EPA and DHA just the same way that fish do that. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. In fact, I think if you get them in the algae-based, you're going to avoid the mercury and dioxin and PCBs. The bigger the fish, the more they concentrate those pollutants. But if you get it from the algae, then you don't have those.
Yep.
And in terms of being able to extract the protein, if you are not able to extract it from the plants, you for sure are not able to extract it from the animal flesh. So, the question of, do you have adequate acid? Do you have adequate pancreatic enzymes? If you have adequate enzymes and acid, you're going to be able to get it from the plants as well as you could get it from animal protein. And if you don't, you would struggle more with the animal protein than the plants.
There's in no way are we living natural lives. The food we're eating is not what the paleo folks ate. Nothing is natural about this life and the food and water that we're drinking. You do the best you can and eat a wide variety of plant-based foods. And if there's any question, there's lovely vegan multivitamins these days. They'll give you a little K2, give you a little zinc, give you a little D, give you a little B12. Take one and get on with your life already, rather than getting into these sword fights. Aha, that's not natural. Nothing is natural here. You eat a whole food, plant-based food stream, fortify whatever you need to, and go out and live and laugh and love as much as you can. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I love that. And my recommendation for anybody who's very curious and questioning, are you getting enough nutrients? Do a nutrient profile panel. Get a test. You can get them from a lot of places online. They'll come and draw your blood. I'm doing one actually right now. I just paid for one. I like to just test and see where I'm at from time to time. And my levels are always very high. And so I'm testing now just to see, because I've increased a lot of the things I'm doing as an athlete. So it's like I'm eating a lot more food. I'm eating a lot more amino acids, a lot more protein, So it's like I want to see where my levels are. But test, don't guess, right? That's a very common thing we want to address. Now, in the last, we really need another hour for this, but in the last few minutes, I'd love each of you maybe just to take a couple of minutes and talk about the importance of stress and cancer, stress on the immune system. A lot of good questions have come in around, how does stress affect cancer? How does it affect the body? How does helping control one's stress and mindset help to reduce or heal cancer? Having a proper positive mind for healing, can that help, et cetera, et cetera. So, we covered this in depth. This is literally what the missing link was about in the first, or in episodes 3 and 4. So if you haven't seen that, make sure everyone go back and watch that. We really cover that in depth because it's such an important part. I think a lot of people forget to address, like you just said, Dr. Klaper, the happiness and joy in your life, and the work that you do, Dr. Ornish, around meditation and relaxation and all of these important factors of living a healthy, wholesome, happy life. So maybe you could take a couple of minutes and talk of the importance of this.
Yeah, well, we only have about a minute each before we run out of time. So let me just say, there was a study that came out that Sheldon Cohen did. He got published in JAMA. I don't know how he got people to volunteer for this, but he dripped rhinovirus and coronavirus, not the COVID-19, but a cousin of that, into volunteers' noses. They all 100% got infected, but not everyone who got infected got sick. And they found those that had 6 or more visits or phone calls from a friend in a 2-week period compared to those who had 2 or fewer, were 4 times less likely to develop the signs and symptoms of being sick compared to those who weren't. So it wasn't just running into the wrong germ, it was how your body interacts with that. And so one of the most powerful things that we can do to enhance our well-being and our health, whatever it is to spend more time with our friends and family and loved ones, rather than seeing that as kind of the luxury that you do after you've done all the important stuff. We can realize that is the important stuff.
Beautiful.
So when
we are holistic beings. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When we look at at the breast cancer population in general, and we look at people who have been diagnosed with an early breast cancer, up to 30% of them will have trauma in their past. And then when we look at the metastatic population, 80% of them will have trauma in their past. And that trauma is not released. That trauma is living inside of them. It's a resident inside of them. And that is causing chronic stress, which is then manifested as a physical symptom, which is breast cancer. And a large part of healing is releasing that trauma. And Nathan and I have spoken extensively about that. And so there's a very clear association and path between trauma and stress and the development of disease, not just breast cancer, all kinds of breast cancer, even cardiac disease. You know, we see people dying of a broken heart after the loss of a spouse. The effects of stress on your body, on your inflammatory system, these things are very real. And so having real tools in place to manage your adverse events that you've had in the past, manage the stressors that you are dealing with now, all will help to contribute and free you from the effects of that chronic stress.
Wow, what a beautiful answer. You've heard some real professional advice here. And yes, I was just going to say that we are holistic beings. Everything is connected. We can talk about individual components, your sympathetic nervous system, your cortisol levels from your adrenals, etc. But they all are the same, basically. They all constitute our entire being. And if that being is filled with fear and anxiety and worry and regret and compounded by lack of sleep and too much sugar and alcohol, this is the recipe for opening the door to all sorts of diseases, autoimmune diseases, but certainly cancers. You want to do the mirror image of that. Get yourself as happy and balanced and functional as you possibly can. We're all here for a very short time, as Dr. Ornish said. And so you don't want to develop the flat forehead syndrome. I could have spent my life happy, and you wind up, what a foolish way to spend my time here. So being as positive as you can will affect all the systems in your whole being there. Feed it with good food as well as good thoughts.
So Nathan, thank you for convening us today. I'm going to have to go. I know you all do as well. But, to me, awareness is always the first step in healing. And thank you for helping us raise awareness. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, your work is amazing, and I'm so honored to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Beautifully done. This is a trailblazing endeavor, and we're really proud of you and honored to be part of it.
I'm so honored, so honored. Thank you all for taking the time to be here to share this great wisdom with everybody. And thank you all for tuning in. Please visit the 3 websites. I'll share with you them now. Dr. Dean Ornish's, you can get his book and dive deeper into his work, is ornish.com. Dr. Jenn's website, and she has a breast cancer course, which is wonderful as well, is realhealthmd.com. And Dr. Klaper and his Moving Medicine Initiative Forward. Incredible work is at drklaper.com. We'll put the links below this video as well. Thank you all for tuning in, for all your great questions, for being here, for caring about your health, and for sharing this with as many people as possible who need to hear this empowering information. We wish you so much health and happiness. Take care.
Bye for now.